We've had a very busy day of NHL news and some trade talk to discuss here tonight as well. Tonight's trade rumors focus on teams like Toronto, Montreal, and the New York Rangers. We have some more signings today, including a couple in Toronto, plus several PTOs have been announced. The NHL has also announced a lot of key dates to look for throughout the NHL season. We have some very interesting comments from Oilers GM Stan Bowman on the offer sheet players who ended up going to St. Louis, and a whole lot more coming up next. So welcome back to another video here at Top Shelf Hockey. As I mentioned, we have lots to discuss here tonight. It's been a very busy day of NHL news. Lots of PTOs announced today, a few signings, get some trade talk, some key dates to look at, and a few other items here to look at on this evening's video. So let's start first with some Leaf news. Of course, we talked a little bit about some of it earlier, and now there's more. We get the Toronto Maple Leafs, of course, earlier in the day had announced that Max Pacioretty had officially signed a professional tryout agreement to go to training camp, and we know that based on comments from NHL insiders and his own agent, Alan Walsh, who put it out on his X account, that Max Pacioretty is going to be signed by the Maple Leafs. There's no doubt. By the time the season rolls around on opening night, he will have a contract. At least that's the belief. Right now, according to his agent and NHL well-connected reporters. So clearly, to get him signed, they are going to have to make a cost-cutting move. Of course, they signed Nick Robertson yesterday. We're going to talk a little bit further about him. And then, of course, after the Pacioretty news, we finally found out something we've been waiting on since July 1. The Leafs have officially signed 6'7" defenseman Jani Hakanpaa. He gets a one-year deal at $1.47 million for the one-year deal. So clearly, we know that he's a big physical defenseman, but there was a lot of concerns over his knees. And I know in Dallas there was not much interest to bring him back because they had a lot of concerns over his health. And clearly the Leafs have taken the entire offseason, because on the first day of free agency, he was a name that was mentioned. Even Brad Treliving even mentioned him by name as well on the recap, but because all the GMs tended to do a media availability late on July 1st. And, well, it was mentioned then, but it wasn't officially done at that point. And here we are all these weeks later, and it finally gets done. So Pacioretty is going on a PTO. He will be a Leaf. Hakanpaa is for sure a Leaf right now. And, of course, Robertson was signed yesterday. A couple of interesting things about Toronto. I'm not sure if there's any kind of superstition here. We know that, they are trying to break a long Stanley Cup drought here, if you will. Last Stanley Cup victory for this team was 1967. I'm not sure the last time they had a player who wore 67, but that is the number that Pacioretty wears. So they bring in number 67 Max Pacioretty, and then 6'7" Jani Hakanpaa is the 6 and the 7. Something here that's going to help break the curse and push them along further in the playoffs. Let's find out as we get ready for a 24-25 interesting season. Lots of other notes around the NHL, especially, like I said, lots of PTO stuff. We got word today the Avalanche confirmed that they are bringing veteran centerman Pierre-Edouard Bellemare to camp on a PTO. Of course, he's played there before, so lots of familiarity. We'll see if that leads to a contract. The Anaheim Ducks also are bringing in a trio of players, including veteran defenseman Mark Pysyk, Gustav Lindstrom, and then forward Boris Kachuk, who finished the year last year in Ottawa. It actually didn't do too bad with the Sens, but they clearly saw many other options to upgrade their bottom six, so he was not brought back and was an RFA not qualified. Some more PTOs. The Rangers are bringing in defenseman Madison Bowie. We got Utah bringing in another interesting young player who might be able to lead himself to a contract, and that's Kyler Yamamoto. Now, of course, he had a good start to his career with the Edmonton Oilers, but ran into a lot of inconsistencies. Got to play with his hometown Seattle Kraken last year, but that didn't really work out either. He's still trying to find his way as a consistent, productive NHL player, we'll say. He's had lots of games for sure. But Yamamoto's still bouncing around. We'll go to camp here with Utah. The Edmonton Oilers today, we would lots to talk about defensemen. While they bring in Travis Dermott. Of course, they still might bring in a right shot D, and you never know, but this might be all they do too. It's hard to say. Dermott is a left shot defenseman, but he is somebody who is comfortable playing both sides of the ice. There's definitely lots of familiarity there. Travis Dermott was a junior teammate of Connor McDavid and Connor Brown. So he was also coached by Chris Knoblauch, so he knows the coach. He knows a couple of the top players, including McDavid. Clearly lots of connections there that, will bring familiarity. And I guess as far as, maybe some guys who can vouch for him, so to speak. But Dermott obviously is still young and could be an interesting piece there. I think he's got an opportunity. When you're looking at guys like Josh Brown, Troy Stetcher, no offense to them, they've been able to keep themselves in the league a while. But, it's not like his competition is super, super stiff. And he's more versatile that he can play both sides. So I wouldn't be completely shocked if Dermott turns this into an opportunity where he gets a contract for the season. Another player that's getting opportunities but has not officially signed a PTO as of yet that I can tell is James Van Riemsdyk, formerly of the Boston Bruins. I did see one report, but I haven't been able to reference enough to say it's for sure, but I've seen some saying that he was going to Seattle on a PTO to go with the Kraken, but I cannot 100% confirm that. But I did see reports today that JVR was in talks with multiple teams, and there was a fair bit of interest, and that he would be going most likely on a PTO, not a one-year deal, to one of the NHL teams' training camps, but we don't know which one just yet. So that's all your PTOs here for today. We also got word that the Chicago Blackhawks, one of their top prospects, if not their top prospect now, number 2 overall pick from the 24 draft, right shot defenseman Artem Levshunov, is unfortunately going to miss the rookie showcase tournament coming up. He's going to be out of action for a couple of weeks due to an injury sustained in the early skates. Ended up blocking a shot and hurt his foot. So he's going to be in a walking boot for a while. And they're, I guess, still pretty confident at this point that he'll be good for the start of the season and hopefully be able to participate in regular training camp, at least to some degree. But for right now, he's not going to be in that tournament. They're not... at this point, Elliot Friedman had said that there wasn't really much concern that it was overly serious, more precautionary, just kind of letting him take some time to let it heal up. No point in going to this rookie showcase if it's going to allow him to not heal properly, and if he can be ready for camp. Or at least before camp's done to get into a good chunk of training camp, that would be better for him. So we'll see. Some interesting comments today from Stan Bowman on the whole offer sheet situation between the Edmonton Oilers and the St. Louis Blues. Comments from a Pierre LeBrun article in The Athletic, basically saying that, to kind of summarize it, is that the Oilers just couldn't match these offer sheets because these players are not worth the money that they were signed to. The exact wording that he gave was the players might be able to grow into these contracts, but as of today, they were well above their actual performance. And I don't think he's wrong. Some might think Bowman's comments are a little, harsh per se, and that maybe there's some hard feelings, but I honestly don't think there was. Based on what we had heard from Dylan Holloway, and after, I can't remember what podcast, he was on a podcast, I think it was the Blues-based one, Cam and Strict, I think, or one of the Andy Strickland shows that he does, where he said that he made it known, and Broberg would have had to have as well, very early in the negotiations. They knew this offer sheet was an option, and it was looming for several weeks by the sounds of it before it was officially signed and made official. So I don't think the Oilers were completely shocked. One actually kind of weird, funny story as well that we learned through the NHL media tour that's going on right now in Vegas is Robert Thomas, of course, one of the top players with the St. Louis Blues, obviously an Ontario-based guy, was actually training with some of the prominent Oilers players when this all went down. He said he was actually had been training and I think they were eating lunch, if I'm not mistaken, with McDavid and Draisaitl. He said it was kind of an awkward time, and he said that they weren't too happy when they heard the news, but at the end of the day, business is business. But yeah, it's just kind of an awkward, funny thing where you get one of the top Blues players training with a couple of the top Oilers players when this news goes down. As we learned today as well, there's lots of key NHL dates to look for throughout the year. The NHL obviously puts this out every ahead of every NHL season. So the key dates here to kind of keep in mind: one, there's a holiday roster freeze every year around the holidays, around Christmas, from December 20th to the 27th is that roster freeze. So there will be no trades during that time. The Four Nation face-off will cause the league to shut down from February the 10th to February the 21st. The last day of the regular season is April the 17th. The playoffs will begin on April the 19th, and the last possible day that the Stanley Cup can be awarded is June 23rd. The NHL trade deadline this year will be pretty well right around the same time it was last year, March the 7th, which is a Friday at 3 o'clock Eastern time. So essentially, I know a lot of people were not real thrilled with the late, cup awarding, you could say. June 23rd gets the season finished up pretty late, and then it's kind of like a track meet to get into the draft and free agency. But when you're going to have these mid-season tournaments, whether it be the Olympics or the Four Nation Face-Off or future World Cups or whatnot, it's going to be impossible, because you can't really start the season that far ahead. You'd have to start the season almost 2 weeks early, and that just would not really be feasible. A big part of the reason why the NHL doesn't start the season sooner is it doesn't want to compete as much with the other top pro sports in the U.S. So it kind of creates a better opportunity for them ratings wise, especially with the NFL being such a big ratings driver amongst all the pro sports in the United States. But those are your key dates here for the NHL. The main one you're going to want to keep in mind is trade deadline March 7th. Otherwise, regular season and playoffs will begin April the 19th will be the first day of the Stanley Cup playoffs. Now, some NHL trade talk around the league. There's one I saw Montreal reporter Marco D'Amico said that he has well-placed sources that have told him that they expect the NHL preseason that could be extremely busy and a lot busier than usual. So this isn't necessarily team-specific, but just a lot of speculation that with teams having more roster flexibility, and of course with the salary cap gains we've had the last few years, there's not as many teams that are at the 50 contract max, or that do have a little bit of cap space and whatnot. And there's a lot of really solid rookies coming into the league as well, which some are really wondering and speculating could push some of these veteran guys that might be on shorter, cheaper deals. The rookies might be able to take their spots. So we might see a very active waiver wire through the preseason. It's usually pretty active anyway, but like I said, a lot of people around the NHL that D'Amico's been talking to really thinks it's going to be even ramped up more and be busier than usual. And it does make sense. So if you look around the league, there is the 50 contract maximum, of course, which can include all your NHL roster, your contracted two-way players and all that, and some of your rookies, except the ones that are slot eligible. And I think there's only one team that's pretty well at the max. There's a lot more room for that kind of stuff especially when you're talking players that are on two-way deals, or players that may not necessarily end up on a full-time NHL roster. There could be a lot of movement with, I guess the less significant, cheaper contracts, you could say. So we'll see. I know when it comes to Montreal, another report that I've seen regarding the Canadiens, the speculation around them is, like I said before, and we started the season preview series today as well. We did the NHL GM report card series. We went through the division by division. I started with the Atlantic, so those are the teams that's been the longest that I've talked about. I'm just going to do the same format. Obviously, I just finished here with the Central Division and then the Metro before them, so I've talked about those teams more recently. So I'm going to do the Atlantic, then the Pacific, then the Metro, then the Central for the season preview. So let's start today. We kicked it off with the Montreal preview, and as I said in that video, one of the things I do expect of Montreal this year is eventually to shed a little bit more of the veterans. At least one or two ideally need to go. And based on what I was reading today, it sounds like a lot of people expect Christian Dvorak to probably be the first to go. If they can find him some good line mates to play, if he can have a decent start to the year, or even a good preseason, even before the season starts, that would be, the first move. Obviously, you got a guy like Armia, I expect will move this year. I do wonder about David Savard, but again, I think Savard would be more of a trade deadline deal if it does happen. At least that would be my guess. Given that Montreal's expected to be more competitive and stronger this year, I would think they'd want to keep him around for more of the year. So we'll see about that. But yeah, Dufour to me would have one of the higher values. He's a little bit younger, plays center. Obviously he's had some bad luck with injuries the past few years. Hasn't had a great run in Montreal, but really for him to be a 3C and he's down to the final year of his contract as well. So obviously, he may not get as good of a contract. He may end up making less money next time, which is, I guess it is what it is for him. But for a team looking to add him in the mix, it might be more desirable than it would have been before. So there's some belief that he may be the first to go, but we'll see. A lot of that's going to depend on how the preseason goes. There was also an Athletic article from Peter Baugh covering the New York Rangers talking about the future of Kakko. Of course, we know Kakko ended up signing a 1-year contract, pretty much equivalent to his qualifying offer. A lot of people were speculating that he could have been traded by the Rangers, and there was serious consideration given to that. And Baugh kind of acknowledges that those were real considerations, and there was some thought around it for sure. But he expects that this is kind of a make or break year for Kakko. Clearly, the Rangers don't want to sell low, which is what they're afraid of. Which I've said that before too. With a player like him who was such a high pick and came in with such a high expectation, pedigree, and looked such like a good, promising prospect to start so slow. But at the same time, I think you could point the finger at where he's been used in the lineup. I don't know about as far as development goes per se, but he hasn't really had a great chance to play consistently with really solid offensive players. Maybe a little bit more last year, but he hasn't been able to seize that moment to kind of we finally saw that breakthrough from Lafreniere last year. Kakko not so much. So what Baugh's observation here is essentially that the Rangers are expected to be a playoff team. They're expected to contend for the division lead, and he figures that when we get to the NHL trade deadline, if Chris Drury wants to make a big addition, there's a pretty good chance that Kakko will be a name that they're willing to move at that point to make that happen. They're in win-now mode, as much as they don't want to give up on a top young drafted player like that too early and have it bite them in the butt down the road. They're more concerned about winning now than anything else. So we'll see what that leads to. Obviously, if he's playing really well and finds another gear and is finally taken off, then I would suspect that's going to be a lot less likely to happen. But if there's still consistency issues with Kakko, I would fully expect, based on this article from Peter Baugh, that he will be one of the main trade assets used to make their deadline acquisitions this year. And of course, like I said, in Toronto, we finally got the word on Pacioretty and Hakanpaa today. I didn't think we'd get the Hakanpaa news. When the Pacioretty news came out this morning, I was like, okay, clearly they're prioritizing Pacioretty. I knew that based on all the reports that Hakanpaa was a likely player they were going to sign, but I wasn't really sure that they would do it just yet cap-wise. They have paper moves they can move right now to, like Matthew Nyes, for example, is still eligible to go to the minors on paper without going through waivers. So they have options. Plus, in the offseason, you can be over the cap by 10%. So, so we'll see, right? It doesn't mean they couldn't do it. I just thought they might wait on Hakanpaa or maybe make him go the route of the PTO. So they didn't do that. So a little bit surprising there. But obviously we had reports from Frank Seravalli yesterday talking about Nick Robertson. More reports today from Dave Pagnotta saying the same thing, backing up the story that he's heard the same rumors that Nick Robertson is still very much on the trade block, and that it's not a given that he does make it to camp and play with the Leafs this year. Even though he's signed, that they're still exploring trades and seeing what's out there. There is a fair bit of interest for sure. They mentions Connor Timmins as being another name to look for. That he says, the article that Pagnotta put out says if they can move Robertson and Timmins along with the other space they have right now, that kind of gives them enough to make it cap compliant for the Hakanpaa contract to come in and to give Pacioretty around that $1 million mark or maybe slightly less. So that might be how they get it done if Robertson and Timmins are the guys that go. But there was also reports before, not long ago, that Timothy Liljegren was very much on the block too. And if you bring in a big guy like Hakanpaa, I do wonder with all the other additions they've made here, maybe Liljegren does become the odd man out. So obviously him and Timmins both, Liljegren would have maybe a little bit better value. Maybe he's the guy that goes and Timmins stays as like your 7th D or something like that. Obviously there's been some talk about guys like Yarncroke or David Kampf. Those contracts are not awesome. And they could be moved as well. They're certainly expendable. And don't forget, the Leafs also have Steven Lawrence on a PTO going to training camp as well. So it's not just Pacioretty trying to get a contract, because I think that's already a handshake, wink, wink kind of deal on the side. Like I said, his own agent, Alan Walsh, has put it out on social media that Pacioretty will be signed before the start of the year. But then there's Steven Lawrence, who's also, like I said, in the mix there too. So depending on how they like Lawrence compared to some of their other options, there could be more complicated situation here. But certainly at this point, we're expecting the Leafs to make a move or two before the end of training camp. It likely includes Robertson. If not, perhaps some combination of Connor Timmins, Timothy Liljegren, or Jarren Krok. They're the most likely candidates here for a move. But the Leafs do need to do something, and all the indications are that's where they're heading. But it's been a busy day. Lots of PTOs. Lots of things are kind of falling into place here for the NHL season, so it won't be long. We're going to have preseason hockey here in a few weeks, so we're getting closer, everybody. So hopefully you've had been able to stay patient while we wait for hockey to come back. We're just around the corner here as well. And like I said, I like to do the season previews a little bit later. Some people I know on YouTube that do this same kind of channel as me. Some of them like to have the previews done way early. They start them like early August. I don't like to do that. I like to wait, because there usually are enough moves that it kind of changes how you kind of will properly set up a preview for one, and how you might feel. Because obviously, like in these videos, I'm kind of going through what I feel like you should expect as a viewer to want to see this year. So we're going to kind of look, okay, here's where things ended last year, and then here's how the team has changed. Here's what you should expect this year. Here's the players you're going to see. Here's some rookies that might get in there. Here's some trades you might see. Just kind of setting up, a look ahead, if you will, for the season. And I always give my thoughts on, how they're going to do. And look at Montreal, for example. If I would have jumped the gun and had that done way early before the Laine trade, that's a big difference with Laine versus not, right? So I don't like to get them going too early. So we started that today, so stay tuned. There'll be lots more coming. So look for all the other Atlantic Division teams here coming in the next few days. We'll slowly get those put out before we jump over to some of the Western teams, and we'll go back and forth here. So Detroit's next up, and after Detroit, you're going to see Boston, Buffalo, Ottawa, Toronto, Florida here in the next 4 or 5 days. So stay tuned for that. Let me know your thoughts on all today's news and rumors down in the comments as well, and we'll talk further. If you're new to the channel, make sure you subscribe and stick around. We'll keep you up to date with all the news, rumors, and analysis of all 32 NHL teams. Thanks for watching. I'll catch you next time.